Several years have passed since that incident, and I haven't found the courage to share it to anyone in my present life. Yet, tonight seems to be the night where I am willing to let go of my past and finally share my thoughts. Looking back on my college years, I recall a time when I thought I had found the perfect partner. It was in our last year of college when we met at a party and our connection was instant. She was a stunning blonde with sun-kissed skin that could have easily landed her on the cover of a magazine. However, it wasn't just her physical beauty that caught my eye. She was a kind, caring, and attentive person who had an active social life with numerous friends. I appreciated how well she blended with my friend group, and over the 3 years that we knew each other, our circles of friends merged effortlessly. Some of our mutual friends even started dating each other, making those years some of the happiest of my life. As I embarked on my postgraduate studies in finance, I couldn't help but notice her intellect and wit. She had a degree in contractual law and was undoubtedly making her own strides in her career. Not to toot my own horn, but I was no slouch in the looks department either. Standing at 5'11" and weighing 190 pounds, I enjoyed hitting the gym and maintaining a healthy physique. While I wasn't necessarily a super athlete, it was safe to say that I had a bit of muscle on my bones. However, despite my physical appearance, I was incredibly shy and didn't have much experience in the realm of romantic relationships prior to meeting her. From the moment we met, I knew she was someone special. Our first evening together was nothing short of magical, and we found ourselves unable to stop talking to each other. From there, our connection only deepened. We started texting and calling each other daily, and before I knew it, we were going on weekly dates. After a year had passed, she moved in with me when I landed a new job. What made our relationship even more special was the fact that we had the full support of each other's families. I loved her family, and they loved her family, and they loved me right back, while her father was somewhat standoffish towards me, as he was with everyone. Her mother and I got along famously. Looking back on those early days, I can only describe it as a whirlwind romance that seemed too good to be true. Looking back on those years of bliss, it's hard to believe that it all ended so abruptly. We had traveled the world together, gone on breathtaking hikes, and indulged in luxurious vacations. Life couldn't have been better. And then I proposed to her. To this day, I can still remember the feeling of elation that coursed through my veins when she said yes. It was like all my dreams had come true in that one moment. From that point on, she took charge of all the wedding planning. We talked about our future together and all the incredible things we wanted to do. Buying a house, having children, and going on family trips. It was a time of hope and excitement, and I couldn't wait to start our new life together. But then, everything changed. One evening, as we both returned home to our apartment, I noticed that she was a little distant. It was a subtle change, but one that I couldn't ignore. We had always been incredibly affectionate towards each other, so her sudden coldness was alarming. At first, it only happened once a week, but then it became more frequent. If it weren't for my habit of listening to Reddit on YouTube, I might not have noticed the change at all. But as the weeks passed, I couldn't help but wait and observe, trying to understand what was happening to our once perfect relationship. These bouts of ignoring me would only last a couple of hours, and then she would be right back to her old self. But after 6 months had passed, and our wedding only a year away, she was acting like this almost every night. It was a confusing and painful time, and I couldn't help but wonder what had gone wrong. I had always thought that we were meant to be together forever, but now I wasn't so sure. The future that we had once talked about seemed to be slipping away, and I was left with nothing but questions and doubts. Despite our strong estimual connection and the great relationship we had with our respective parents, things started to change between us. We had just celebrated Thanksgiving at her parents' home in Louisville, Kentucky, which was a yearly tradition we always looked forward to. However, this time around, something was off. During the dinner, she was acting very distant towards me, which was unusual because we were always very affectionate with each other. As it turned out, her observant mother noticed the tension between us and decided to pull her daughter aside to talk to her. I could hear their muffled argument from the other room, and it only added to my confusion and concern. After the heated exchange, they both rejoined the family as if nothing had happened. But I was left wondering what could have caused such a sudden shift in her behavior towards me. When I eventually mustered the courage to confront her about it, she refused to discuss the matter further and asked me to wait until we got back home to talk about it. Deep down, I knew that something was wrong, but I chose to ignore my gut feeling, thinking that we could work through anything as long as we loved each other. However, little did I know that this was only the beginning of the end for us. I met her mother for the first time, and I couldn't help but notice the striking resemblance between them. They both had the same dazzling looks, with just a few grey strands in her mother's long, thick blonde hair that added a touch of maturity and elegance to her appearance. I couldn't shake off the feeling that this detail would somehow become important later on. When we returned home, I confronted her about her distant behavior. She was reluctant to discuss it, but after a week of pressing her, she finally came clean and confessed that a male co-worker had been showing interest in her. She wanted to be honest with me, so she handed me her phone and allowed me to peruse through her messages. However, as I scrolled through the conversation, I realized that all the texts that would have occurred during the time period when she had been withdrawing from me were deleted. While there was nothing inappropriate in the remaining messages, the missing ones made me suspicious. In an effort to alleviate my doubts, I decided to turn on the locator on her phone. Since we shared the same phone plan, I thought it would be a simple way to put my mind at ease and confirm that she wasn't doing anything wrong. Little did I know that this decision would have significant repercussions on our relationship in the future. To begin with, I was feeling pretty confident about my relationship with my girlfriend, despite some strange behavior from her lately. We had been together for a while, and things had been going great until one evening when I noticed that she was acting a little distant towards me. At first, it was only happening once a week, but it soon became more frequent until it was almost every night. I was at a loss to explain her behavior until we visited her family over Thanksgiving in Louisville, Kentucky. That's when I noticed that her mother was also acting strangely towards me, and my girlfriend seemed standoffish towards me when her mother was around. One day, her mother pulled her aside to talk, and I could hear them arguing. When they returned to the rest of the family, they acted as if nothing had happened. I was curious about what had caused the argument, so I asked my girlfriend about it when we were back home. At first, she was hesitant to talk about it, but after a week of me pressing her, she finally confessed that a guy at her work was trying to get closer to her. She even showed me her phone to prove that there was nothing untoward in their conversations, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So, I decided to turn on the locator on her phone, which we shared, to see if she was telling the truth. However, things took a turn for the worse when my girlfriend went to her company Christmas party. I couldn't attend due to food poisoning, but I was watching her location on my phone. She started off at a restaurant, then went to the party venue and a bar. It was all normal until I saw that her phone had stopped at a downtown hotel. At this point, I was feeling terrible, not just because of the food poisoning, but also because of what I had just discovered. I fell asleep from sheer exhaustion at 2 a.m., but when I woke up at 7 a.m., she was still at the hotel. This news hit me hard, and I was left feeling betrayed and confused about what had happened. After her strange behavior at her parents' home during Thanksgiving, I had a suspicion that something was off in our relationship. I couldn't put my finger on it, but her body language towards me had changed. However, it wasn't until a few weeks later that she finally confessed that a guy at her work was trying to get to know her better. She showed me her phone, but I noticed that all the texts that would have happened during the times she was being distant from me were removed. Although there was nothing inappropriate in the texts, I still had a feeling that something was amiss. My suspicions were confirmed when she went to a company Christmas party without me. I had planned on going, but unfortunately I came down with food poisoning and had to back out. she went with a girlfriend, and I told her to have a good time and that I would see her in the morning. As I lay in bed, feeling miserable and barely able to move, I decided to check her location on my phone. At first, everything seemed normal as she went to a restaurant, then the party venue, and then a bar. However, when I saw her phone stop at a downtown hotel, I knew something was wrong. I felt sick in every way imaginable, and as I tried to get some rest, I saw that she was still at the hotel when I woke up a few hours later. When she finally came home at noon, I asked her about her night without mentioning anything about knowing her locations. She talked about the restaurant, party, and bar, but then she said she went to her girlfriend's house to spend the night. This was the first lie, and it made me feel even more suspicious. Over the next 3 months, she started working later, and later, and later, and when I asked her about it, she became defensive. Her behavior towards me and her mother became increasingly distant, which made me believe that there was something more going on. Despite my suspicions, I kept my thoughts to myself. However, 2 weeks later, I received some good news at work. I was given a new project that required me to fly to the Midwest Monday through Friday for the next 5 weeks, and it came with a salary increase. When I shared the news with my fiancée, she seemed delighted for me. However, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was excited for the wrong reasons. So, I went online and ordered 4 motion-activated spy cameras for our apartment. I placed them in strategic locations such as the living room, kitchen, bedroom, and hallway, and connected them to a hidden network. I secured them with a password and waited for what I feared would happen next. During my first week away, my girlfriend invited her girlfriends over for 2 nights straight and never had to work late once. However, things took a sharp turn on the 3rd night when she had a guy over. I was livid. Sitting alone in my hotel room, I found myself screaming at the computer screen, hurling every insult I could think of at her. Then, they began to engage in adult activities. The worst part was when I decided to call her to check in on how her day went, and she answered the phone while still in the act with him. She told me she was at the gym working out, but her heavy breathing told a different story. Upon my return home on Friday evening, I completely ignored her and went straight to bed. The next day, I woke up early and went for a bike ride to clear my head. I was so consumed with anger and betrayal that I cycled over 50 miles without even realizing it. It was the farthest I had ever biked before, with my previous record being 30 miles. But that day, I pushed myself to ride for 105.6 miles. By the time I made it back home, I was completely exhausted, so I took a shower to freshen up. Later that night, we went out with our friends and had a wild time, drinking and partying like there was no tomorrow. I couldn't help but wonder if the time we had that night was considered breakups time, even though she was still completely oblivious to the fact that I planned on ending things between us. Emotions were running high within me as I was dealing with a mix of heartbreak, anger, and betrayal all at once. It was difficult to come to terms with the fact that the woman who used to be so attentive was now oblivious to my pain. The intensity of my emotions was compounded by the fact that I loved her so much. It wasn't until I confided in one of our mutual friends that I found out that everyone knew about her infidelity for months. The realization that they all felt sorry for me, but chose not to say anything, left me feeling even more hurt and betrayed. Looking back, I now see that they gradually stopped inviting us out about 3 months prior. Despite everything, I decided to give it one last try and win her back. So, I planned an entire weekend filled with activities. To spoil her in every possible way, I made sure to wine and dine her, provide massages and pampering, and talk about our future plans together. As the night progressed and after a few glasses of wine, she began to cry, and I knew that the guilt was finally coming to the surface. I asked her what was wrong, and offered to listen if she had something to confess or needed forgiveness. All she could say was how much she loved me, which hurt even more considering the 4 videos I had of her and the other guy engaging in adult acts in our apartment. During my extended travels to the Midwest over the course of 10 weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in my relationship. I found myself increasingly suspicious of my partner's behavior during my absence. Despite being away from home, I remained attentive and communicative with her every weekend, hoping to maintain our connection. However, I couldn't help but notice that each week she grew more distant and uninterested in our conversations. As the weeks went on, I began to feel a deep sense of unease and betrayal. It wasn't until I returned home that my fears were confirmed. I discovered over 41 hours of footage on my recording devices, documenting my partner's adult encounters with a co-worker while I was away. The most startling part was that she never once claimed to be working late during my travels. I felt completely emasculated. I even gave her another chance, like some kind of beta. I knew that I couldn't continue the relationship any longer. I couldn't trust her, and the thought of her being intimate with someone else while I was away consumed me with jealousy and anger. With my heart heavy and my mind set, I began to devise a plan to break away from the toxic relationship. I created a 12-step getaway plan, hoping to distance myself from her and start anew. It was a difficult decision to make, but I knew that it was the only way forward for my emotional well-being. I had to leave behind the person I thought I knew and loved and begin the journey towards healing and moving on. 1. Gather evidence. 2. Get her out of the way in order to execute my plan. I scheduled a 2-week exclusive getaway trip for us at an all-inclusive resort Barbados. She was ecstatic. Then, a week before the trip, I claimed I had to back out and told her to take a friend. I knew it was over when she showed no disappointment that I couldn't go. 3. Terminate our apartment lease. It would expire 3 days into her trip, and I was the sole signature on the lease. 4. Find a job in another town. The company I had been assisting in the Midwest had offered me a job with a slight increase in salary. 5. Find a new place to live. I got an apartment in the above said location. When she is gone, perform the following. 6. Take her to the airport. Go back home and pack all her things same day, Saturday 7. Get a new phone number email. Cancel all social media. Monday 8. Separate us completely in regard to finances. Withdrew all monies from our joint accounts and then closed them. I put all her money in an envelope and packed it in her things. Monday 9. Have the movers pack all my things up and ship it west. Monday 10. Take all her things to her mother's house, 600 miles away. All my fiancée's belongings fit into the back and bed of my F-250 crew cab. Tuesday through Saturday. 11. Give her mother the evidence. 12. Start my new life. It was a difficult decision for me to pack up my ex-fiancée's things, as I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing anything illegal or unethical. I carefully and neatly packed up all of her belongings, and I must admit that it was a heartbreaking experience. I had never cried so much in my life. I had always read stories on Reddit about significant others who promised never to cheat again after getting caught, but they continued to do so. I had hoped that my ex-fiancée would confess to her infidelity and that we could work towards forgiveness and moving forward. Unfortunately, she never did. There were times when she came close to telling the truth, but the secret was too difficult for her to reveal. On the Tuesday morning of my departure, I left our apartment located north of DC for the last time. It was a 10-hour journey to her mother's house, and I wasn't prepared for what awaited me when I arrived. I reached her mother's house at around 8 in the evening, and I expected her to be surprised to see me as I had come unannounced. Her residence was located in a gated community, so I had to buzz her house from the front gate, and when I drove up, she was waiting for me outside. It was evident that she had been crying, and she hugged me, sobbing uncontrollably, stating that she thought her husband was cheating on her with a younger, slimmer, and more beautiful woman. I was dumbfounded and held her for about 10 minutes as she cried on my right shoulder, soaking it with her tears and snot. After she had composed herself, I asked if we could go inside and talk. We went inside and I asked where her husband was. She said that he told her he was going fishing with his friends at a remote cabin that was an hour away. She added, "He hates fishing." She gave me all the clues that she had noticed, and apparently he had been cheating on her for a year. We decided to investigate further and found a hold charge on his credit card for a 5-star hotel that was only 20 minutes away. A call later confirmed that her husband was, in fact, staying at the hotel with his mistress for 4 nights. I found myself standing in front of my former fiancé's mother's house, trying to find the right words to say. After a brief moment of hesitation, I decided to go ahead and knock on the door. To my surprise, she was already waiting for me outside. Her eyes were red and swollen, indicating that she had been crying a lot. When I asked her what was wrong, she immediately broke down in tears, telling me that she suspected her husband was cheating on her with a younger and prettier woman. I was dumbfounded by this revelation and couldn't help but feel for her. She was soaking my shoulder with her tears and snot, but I didn't mind. I just held her tightly until she was able to compose herself. After we went inside, I showed her the evidence I had compiled on my former fiancé's infidelity, and she was shocked to see the truth laid out in front of her. We both cried and hugged each other for what seemed like an eternity. As we sat there, she suggested that we drown our sorrows in a few bottles of Moscato and some revenge intimacy. I was taken aback by her suggestion, but ultimately decided to go along with it. I won't go into too much detail, but let's just say that I gave her everything she desired and more. It was a memorable experience, and it helped me to move on from my former fiancé's betrayal. Once our intense days together were over, I said goodbye and headed off to my new destination. My ex-fiancée kept me informed about what happened when she returned, and her reaction was unforgettable. I had cancelled my phone before she returned, so when she called for a ride, the disconnected line indicated she couldn't reach me. Her lover then picked her up and left her at the door, where a new couple, new tenants, answered. After many attempts to contact me, she went to stay with her girlfriends, as she was aware her co-worker was already married. She eventually called her mom in a panic, who told her that I had come and dropped off all her belongings along with all her money, 600 miles away, but did not mention anything about our fling. Her mom also revealed that she knew about her cheating and that I had found a new job, a new place to live, and a new career. She also mentioned that she and her husband were separating due to infidelity. She cried for days and took a week off work, but found comfort in the arms of her married lover. Her mom never disclosed my whereabouts, and I cut off all ties with that part of my life, except for my ex-fiancé's mom, who has kept our secret to this day. In the end, my ex-fiancé was ghosted.